Yep, heads up, there's going to be maybe one or two spoilers here. Solo, a Star Wars story. This is a conflicting movie for me, honestly. There's a lot I do like about this movie. There's a lot of interesting ideas or elements to this film that I felt were done pretty good service. The characterization I felt was fairly solid, but the entire time I was watching this movie in particular, more so than I have been when I watched, say, The Last Jedi or Rogue One or The Force Awakens, never before have I felt the presence of the marketing juggernaut at play with regards to the franchise. I'll explain a little bit more as I get into it, and I'll come back to this theme a little bit later when I get into the cons. Something that the Red Letter Media guys have kind of mentioned every once in a while in their reviews of the more recent Star Wars movies, which is it's a very limited franchise or a very limited universe. And it's not necessarily that, your imagination can't run rampant when it comes to creatures or technology or designs or things like that. No, that's not what I mean by limited. I mean, the franchise seems to be very much in a stranglehold of not deviating from certain plot elements. As usual, I want to talk about some of the stuff I actually did enjoy about this movie. I did, again, enjoy what I have been enjoying about this resurgence of Star Wars movies is how they are able to be a little bit better about blending in your CGI wizardry with more practical, more, tangible effects. I feel that's done pretty well here. It's not a green screen fiesta like the prequels were. You, very much like Rogue One especially, you get a sense that these are actual sets, these are actual locations the actors are working with. The creature effects are very well done. My boy Therm's scissor punch gets seated right next to Lando at a certain point, and as dumb as that image of a giant lobster in a mechanical suit is, you know what? It works. At least it's something that the background actors and Donald Glover and the filmmakers can work with actually there on set. So I appreciate this return to some convincing practical effects. I really like the cast for the most part. I feel the actors they chose to play young Han and young Lando, Alden Ehrenreich and Donald Glover, they are very suitable fits for these characters. Alden Ehrenreich, he does a fine job with the role, and that was always going to be hurdle number one, not just for him but for the fandom too, is out of all of Harrison Ford's iconic roles, Han Solo, Indiana Jones, Jack Ryan, to a lesser extent, Deckard from Blade Runner. Han Solo has always felt like the character who is mostly Harrison Ford, if that makes any sense. Indiana Jones, you get a sense that there is more of a do-gooder mentality in the character. I mean, he's brutal and ruthless. He can be kind of compromised at times, but you get a sense that there's a little bit more of that do-gooder, serialized adventure type character, Doc Savage type character in that particular role. Jack Ryan, of course, from the Clancy books and so forth, probably sticks true to form with regards to that. Deckard is just a morose motherfucker. So, and I know Harrison Ford can be morose at times, but you get a sense that he is more of a smarmy jackass in real life than just being a sourpuss. So that's why Han Solo, it never felt like Harrison Ford was acting when he was playing Han Solo. Like that was just Harrison Ford. That was, again, the major challenge Alden Ehrenreich had to overcome, is how to make this character his own without feeling as though he's doing either a Harrison Ford parody or, a performance that is completely disconnected from everything you relate Han Solo to. Kind of a very similar situation that Brandon Routh found himself in probably a couple years back with Superman Returns, in that I feel what he did in that movie was he was able to give a solid Christopher Reeve Superman performance. But because that movie was so ingratiated towards the Reeve era of Superman films, he wasn't allowed to let the character kind of become his own. He had to play it into the Christopher Reeve format. And here, I feel that's sort of taking place with what Ehrenreich's doing, is that because this is in the Star Wars franchise, and the role of Han Solo has been, up until this point, only performed by one person who has kind of made it the signature edition of that character. He's not given a lot of wiggle room to kind of make the character his own. He has to kind of play into more Harrison Fordy type qualities in his performance, but it's a solid imitation, I'll give it. And I'm not meaning imitation in a negative sense at all. Like, that was going to be an impossible task for any actor regardless, whether it was going to be him or the thousands apparently of contenders that were up for the role, was having to overcome the Harrison Ford hurdle. So in that regard, I feel he does a serviceable job. Woody Harrelson, I mean, his character is a complete trope of characters you've seen before in films just like this, but it's Woody Harrelson. He's got enough of that Woody Harrelson-y charm and swagger to be able to portray this character of Beckett, kind of Han Solo's mentor, really well. Emilia Clarke, the part of it too was with some of these characters, you don't garner a lot of investment in them to begin with because you know that's not where the story's going. And with Emilia Clarke's character, Kira, where she is playing like Han Solo's first big love, you know that's not where it's going, so you kind of instinctually limit your investment in the character automatically, knowing that, oh, well, there's no happy ending here, so why should I even care? As an actress, she does fine here. There's just not a lot for this particular character to work off. Much like Woody Harrelson, it's another trope character, the femme fatale, long-lost love, this girl you've yearned for years, but then you discover that there's a more duplicitous nature about her. She does fine with whatever little bit of characterization they gave her in this film. Again, same with Woody Harrelson. Donald Glover rounds out like the principal cast, and he's by far the highlight of the movie. His portrayal of Lando, whereas I felt Alden Ehrenreich was doing more of a Harrison Ford imitation, Donald Glover, it feels like he is Billy D. Williams. Like, it doesn't feel like an imitation. He's just got that natural suaveness and sophistication about him that you feel as though someone just de-aged Billy Williams considerably. He's without a doubt the highlight of the movie, and has a lot of... Honestly, when him and Ehrenreich are working off of each other in their moments together on screen, those are really well done. Like, I really did like their card game. I forget what the... Sabak or something like that. It's essentially the card game that they eventually play together, and he ends up losing the Falcon to him because of wagering it during this card game. That was actually a fun scene. I enjoyed kind of their back and forths and kind of giving each other grief during this game and calling each other's bluffs. Like, it felt very natural. It felt, like I said, very suave and sophisticated on Donald Glover's part. So without a doubt, if you're a Donald Glover fan, or if you just want to see more great Lando performance, this is the movie for you. Like I said, everyone does fine with their roles. It just feels though as at some points characters aren't given enough to chew on. Oh, the other cast member I forgot to mention, Paul Bettany. Now, the story with Paul Bettany's character is that originally Michael K. Williams was supposed to be playing this character, and I believe he was supposed to be like a fully realized CGI practical effect puppetry character, but due to the reshoots that Ron Howard had to go in and basically reshoot 90% of the movie after they fired Lord and Miller, Michael K. Williams was no longer available for reshoots, so they had to completely redo the character and completely recast him with Paul Bettany. He's okay as this villain, but this is getting a little bit into my issues with the film overall. You get the sense, and I would have gotten this sense, I feel, even if I didn't know about all the behind-the-scenes turmoil that Solo has been through, I would have gotten this sense anyways, in that this movie, much like Justice League last year, this movie feels its reshoots. It's not as sloppily done as Joss Whedon's reshoots on Justice League. There's no CGI mustache lip stuff going on in this movie. You definitely have that feeling like the editing, the pacing of the thing, characters will immediately jump planet to planet during like a voiceover, and there are points where when people are having conversations with Paul Bettany and the editing does something in a way that you'll have like a close-up of Solo, for example, and you hear Paul Bettany's voiceover even though he's in the same room as him, and usually that doesn't bother me so much, but it felt really kind of cut and pasted together at times. And from Ron Howard, I was expecting something a little bit more smoother with regards to its transitions, with regards to maybe its continuity a little bit. And that kind of ties into my major issue with the film. And it's not even stemming from the plot, because if it had just stuck to the basic premise of space pirates, and Han Solo just happens to be one of them, and they go take on a dangerous gig, if it just stuck with that, I would have been cool with this movie. I would have, probably been more engaged with this film than I was. And it's not a terrible film, but towards when it starts to reach its inevitable conclusion, there are issues that start to crop up for me. And they've been cropping up here and there throughout a lot of the new Star Wars stuff. I either didn't see them on the initial run through, or upon rewatching certain things like Rogue One or Last Jedi, they become a little bit more prevalent with repeated viewings. The Star Wars franchise, Lucasfilm, overall, it needs to change up its game plan with regards to this expanded universe or this longevity for the franchise. Otherwise, this Star Wars circus every year idea is going to get old really, really fast. It kind of already is. You kind of saw glimpses of it with the vehement backlash against Last Jedi, which, here's the thing, I think Last Jedi is perfectly fine. There's just a couple of things that kind of bugged me with regards to that, but I love the fact that it took your revered franchise and flipped it around in many different shapes and poses. I kind of like that, because nothing is sacred. It's all bullshit. It's all make-believe, people. Who gives a shit that Luke Skywalker didn't go out like the ultimate heroic, superheroic badass you always been pictured in your head since you were like 6? Guess what? People get to take liberties, creative liberties even, with characters. And ultimately, that's what brings me back to Solo here. Solo feels like a movie meant to placate those die-hard, uber-fickle fans. Everything about it, even before going into it, hearing that 90% of the movie had to be reshot with Ron Howard, hearing that a good degree of Lord and Miller's script had to be, or story idea had to be redone, that Kasdan was very disapproving of them taking liberties with his script, that it really wasn't that much of a collaborative effort, and that, this would have been maybe the first actual Star Wars comedy. That would have been something I would have been more interested in seeing, but they went back and redid this whole movie to placate fans. That ultimately could be the downfall of Star Wars, is the fact that Lucasfilm is ready and willing to buckle because fans are fickle and whiny. And if you don't give them the same thing over and over and over, they won't go along with you, and they'll take their money with them. Rian Johnson found that out with Last Jedi. He tried different things. He tried to subvert your expectations. I know, Red Letter Media loves that too. Some of those expectations that were subverted or were twisted, some of them worked, some of them did not. It's a give and take, certainly. When I start hearing about a lot of the comments people were leaving about Last Jedi especially, and how it's like, how dare you do this to my beloved, iconic childhood characters? Part of me is just like, oh, this is what's going to kill it. This is what's going to kill the franchise, is you can never branch out. You're not allowed to. You're not allowed to take some ideas or take some maybe familiar characters and do something different with them. Challenge yourself to do something different with them, because people just have that nostalgic factor burrowed in firm like a tick. And if you deviate from that in any way, shape, or form, they will be all over you like shit. Like flies on shit. And that was very prevalent in this movie. Like I said, there's stuff I like about it, but there's also stuff I would have liked more. Again, this movie's last act undoes quite a bit of the investment I had in it to begin with. At first, when it's just about, okay, we need to steal this, what is it, the coaxium, the hyperfuel, when we need to get it from this mining area, and we need to make this break-in and stuff like that. I was like, you know what? I'm all aboard for this. This is something like, yeah, sure, I've seen stuff like this before, even close parallel to something like Firefly, but you know what? This does it for me. I'm all for this simple story that in no way, shape, or form has to deal with the Sith, or the Jedi, or the Rebellion versus the Empire. Oh, fuck you, last act of the movie. Some spoilers here. They find a way to wrangle in the Rebellion at some point towards the end of this movie. Some characters show up, and the coaxium, which has been the big MacGuffin throughout all of this story, all of a sudden it's made clear like why they want it, and it has to deal with their fight against the Empire. Han Solo, won't you join us in our fight against the Empire? And then there's a cameo towards the end of the movie. Emilia Clarke shares some screen time with a character that, if you've been following the expanded universe stuff, this may not be a surprise to you. If you've been following stuff like the was it Star Wars Rebels show and books and so forth, this probably isn't the biggest shock of a cameo for you. But as I put myself in the perspective of someone who only knows the movies, I was thinking like, what? Why? And you get a sense that like, oh, we brought this in because it's going to tie back into the whole Sith, Jedi, dark side, light side conflict. Couldn't you tell just a simple story about pirates in space? I would have been just fine with that. I don't need the Star Wars fan service that's treated like gospel. And that's a recurring thing throughout this movie too, is I would have preferred it more, because for all intents and purposes, this is a prequel film. I would have preferred it more if they had not paid off certain reveals or plot elements as these big monumental things. So, for example, they introduced the Millennium Falcon. Lando shows him his ship, which is the Millennium Falcon. And remember in the first Star Wars, when basically Luke, Obi-Wan, and Han and all of them are walking to the ship, Chewie's just doing some repairs on it while they're walking towards it. Yeah, it's shown in a wide shot. There's a bit of an orchestral swell, but it's nothing operatic. It's nothing grand, because this is your first time seeing the Falcon. It's followed up by Luke going, what a piece of junk. You know what? That's great. It downplays the importance of that ship, because the ship at that point wasn't iconic. That ship was just a plot device. It was just a setting. It was just a means for the characters to get from point A to point B. Here in Solo, when they revealed the Millennium Falcon, which you've been seeing on and off since not just the 70s, but since it came back in 2015 with Force Awakens, the Millennium Falcon is nothing new. They show the Millennium Falcon, the grand familiar, like, dun 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 da da da, one of those da 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 da, one of the iconic Stingers hits. And instead of just being like, okay, here's the ship, let's get on it, you see like close up of Han Solo's face. It looks like he's about to weep, and you're surveying every inch of this ship as though it was the Enterprise from this first Star Trek movie. Like, just take your time on that cockpit area. And as he walks into the cockpit and Lando's there at the controls, and there's this just looking, he's like, and when they first go into hyperspace, they focus on him going like, yeah, I'm gonna be doing this a lot, even though I already have been doing this a lot because I've been part of the Imperial fleet for a couple of years now, so hyperspace is nothing new to me. And honestly, hyperspace shouldn't be that big a deal to anybody who flies ships planet to planet. Hyperspace, I always figured, was just part of everyday transit. Why is Han Solo, who's been in outer space for a few years now, so enthralled by hyperspace? It was stuff like that that was bugging me. And again, it ties into this idea of Star Wars is limiting itself because it doesn't dare not pay lip service or pay fan service anymore. Fans complain when you don't do that, apparently, and Lucasfilm doesn't believe necessarily in committing to creative ideas or creative divergences. They're all about, no, let's do it by committee. That's what happened with Lord and Miller, I guarantee you, is that Lord and Miller had an idea. And there are points in this movie where I felt like this feels like a Lord and Miller moment. The more comedic stuff, the lighter moments, the more moments that don't have a lot of gravitas playing into them felt more like something from Lord and Miller's ideas. But then immediately you get like a sense of more, oh, this is far more epic than what that previous scene was touting it to be. This is more than just a simple space heist. This is the beginnings of the rebellion. Ooh! It was kind of not doing much for me, and ultimately, if you're going to be having a Star Wars movie every year now, I don't know how much that need to pay homage to the grandiose nature of Star Wars all the time is going to do it for you. Like, I want to see so many different stories. I want to be able to... I wanted just this simple crime and space movie. I want movies about people who have nothing to do with the Empire or Rebellion struggle. Like, I don't know. I'm at a weird point where I just had a birthday, so I'm one more year older, and it seems every year my fandom, I guess, is less and less in the blinders area where, no, as long as it's cool, oh, see, that character's up there, I love that character. It's beginning to be a little bit more like this, and in my peripheral is all this other shit, and you see the movie-making machine at work, and you're just like, tell different stories. So while there's stuff to appreciate in Solo, certain little nods here and there were certain Easter eggs that worked for me. I did get a little chuckle out of the fact that Han shot first. That's a spoiler, I'm sorry. Han shoots first in here. I kind of like that. And I feel like that was a Lord and Miller moment too, where I'm like, you know, I feel like that was them having their little meta commentary for a second there. If you weren't happy with Last Jedi, I have a feeling you'll be fine with this movie. And I don't mean that as an insult or anything like that. You're entitled to like or dislike whatever movie you want. I felt like Last Jedi really kind of put a lot of fans off of Star Wars. Solo might endear you back to it because it's telling something that's familiar, something that you're more familiar or more comfortable with, probably. Stays, for the most part, stays true to the characterization of it, but the story, I'm so over the galactic conflict story. I'm over the fact that the Rebellion and the Empire have to be ingratiated or integrated into every story that goes on in this world. I understand if they're there in the background. I don't mind that the Empire's there in the background. And for a while in the movie, it felt like that. Like, they're just there. You see stormtroopers on the street, that's fine. You see a Star Destroyer up in, like, a docking area in the sky, that's fine. Han Solo goes into the Imperial Academy, and that was actually kind of a fun moment too, because they show, like, they have this advertisement in the spaceport saying, like, come join the Imperial fleets and serve your galaxy or whatever, and they actually use the Imperial March dun 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 dun, dun as their jingle. I actually thought that was kind of funny. I kind of like that a lot. But he goes and enlists in this cadet program. You get a sense that he just doesn't like being there in the Imperial fleet, that he's just kind of there just because he was trying to elude detection and not be sent back to a hellhole. So it's nothing like, oh, the Imperial fleet or the Empire is such a horrible thing. No, the Empire really had nothing to do with the first 2/3 of this movie, and then all of a sudden we got to bring that conflict. You might enjoy the movie. Maybe I'm just an old grouch at this point. I didn't have any problems with it other than the fact that it was just reminding me that Star Wars is working itself into a corner. And that was the biggest downside to the whole experience. Like I said, the visuals, stunning. The performances, fine. And sometimes in the case of Donald Glover, exemplary. This one reeks the most of franchise appeasement, more so than any of the previous ones. And if that's something that kind of irks you at this point with Star Wars, that may be a deal breaker. Give me one for the road, Chewie.